Many of us are being flooded with information about the climate. It's hard not to feel a sense of crisis fatigue, a feeling that the problem is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Kind of like a background hum of anxiety that we've learned to tune out just to get through the day. We're told the world is changing, but it often feels like a moral lecture rather than a practical reality. So instead of adding to that noise or debating the ethics of lifestyle choices, I thought I'd look at something much more grounded: the internal briefings of the British state. This week, I want to focus on a perspective we rarely see in the headlines: the view from the Ministry of Defense and national security experts. Recently, a national emergency briefing took place in the UK, and it didn't talk about saving the planet in the way we're used to. It talked about defending the fabric of the country. The system we're exploring today is defined by national resilience. This isn't just about military strength. This is about a nation's ability to withstand and recover from shocks. In the UK, the Strategic Defence Review and the Ministry of Defence have begun treating climate change and biodiversity loss not as an environmental issue, but as core security threats. They are looking at 3 specific pillars. Pillar number 1, climate security, how a changing planet shifts the threat picture. Number 2, energy self-sufficiency, moving away from vulnerable centralized fossil fuel chains. And number 3, ecosystem stability, understanding nature as critical national infrastructure. What really matters here is a concept the military calls the threat multiplier. The key dynamic driving this isn't that climate change is a new enemy, it's that it makes every existing problem worse. Think of it as a stress test on a building. If the foundation, meaning our biodiversity and climate, is stable, the building can handle a lot of weight. But as biodiversity declines, with monitored wildlife populations down 73% since 1970, the foundation cracks. Now, a standard economic shock or geopolitical spat doesn't just cause a tremor, it can cause the whole structure to collapse. And this is the mechanism of cascading crises, where food health and energy failures hit all at once. For individuals, cascading crises don't arrive as one big event. They arrive as stacked pressures, a heat wave, followed by a price shock, followed by political anger, until everyday life just becomes really difficult. Let's look at evidence in motion. According to the latest UK security assessment, the evidence of this engine in motion is already here. In Iraq, Lieutenant General Richard Nagy noted a startling statistic. In his battle group of 1,000 soldiers, he had 0 casualties from the enemy, but 5 were sent home for heat stroke, and 250 medical trips were used just to keep people alive in 50-degree heat. The environment was a more effective combatant than the opposition. Closer to home, the UK's food security is increasingly fragile. The UK imports 40% of their food, and 25% of that comes from the Mediterranean, a region that is currently facing record-breaking droughts and fires. This assessment points out that nature is a finite asset underpinning our economy. In 2022 alone, ecosystem services were valued at £87 billion in the UK. When those services like soil fertility or pollination fail, it shows up as food inflation at your local supermarket. And this is why climate risk doesn't announce itself as climate. It announces itself as unaffordable groceries, stressed health services, and a quiet erosion of stability. But this is where things get more complicated. There's a downside that gets often overlooked: the risk of the ungovernable state. When crises cascade, when food prices spike while the grid is strained and migration increases, it erodes trust in government. This isn't just about one political party losing to another. This is about the possibility that Western democratic systems themselves cannot cope with the sheer volume of simultaneous shocks. The danger is that as the state becomes overwhelmed, we see a breakdown of social norms and a rise in reactionary populist politics that promise simple solutions to complex systemic failures. And when people fear systems are failing faster than anyone can fix them, trust becomes the first casualty. And trust is the foundation of any functioning democracy. And we can see this playing out in how we think about energy. For decades, we've relied on a centralized grid powered by gas and oil. This is a massive security liability. By contrast, look at Ukraine. Despite relentless Russian attacks on their energy infrastructure, their grid has remained surprisingly resilient. Why? Because a significant portion of their remaining power comes from decentralized renewables. You can't knock out 1,000 dispersed wind turbines with a single missile in the same way you can a massive gas power plant. Decentralization, often discussed as a green goal, is actually a military-grade defensive strategy. So what does all of this mean for people who aren't writing defense briefings or energy policy? It means that resilience is no longer something that the state can provide alone, and it was never meant to be. At everyday scale, national resilience shows up in very ordinary places. For instance, whether your local shop still has affordable food after a bad harvest, or whether your home can stay cool during a heatwave without overwhelming the grid, or whether your community can cope when shocks overlap instead of arriving one at a time. The uncomfortable truth is that resilience is not built through heroism or sacrifice. It's built through redundancy, diversity, and proximity, such as multiple energy sources instead of one fragile one, such as local food alongside global trade, such as healthy ecosystems that absorb shocks instead of amplifying them. And for individuals, action doesn't mean doing everything. It means aligning with resilience rather than fragility. And that might look like supporting decentralized energy and local food systems. It might mean backing policies that invest in nature, not as decoration, but as infrastructure. And it might mean resisting political narratives that promise strength through exclusion, rather than stability through preparedness. None of this replaces the role of the state, but it does change what we ask of it. Not spectacle, not slogans, but systems that work under pressure. Our systems weren't built for this kind of reality, so none of this is easy. We are operating on 19th century notions of borders and 20th century notions of endless resources. And there is a powerful inertia in our politics. Some argue that we should ignore climate change to focus on current threats like Russia, but the security briefing makes it clear that this is a false choice. You cannot separate the threat of a hostile state from the threat of the ecological collapse that state might exploit. Facing the threat you wish you had rather than the one in front of you is a recipe for strategic failure. This matters because what's really being tested here is the resilience of our democracy. The National Emergency Briefing reminds us of an old warning. There are only 9 years between mankind and anarchy. When we protect our biodiversity, we aren't just protecting rare species, we are protecting the floor of our civilization. Peace and climate are two sides of the same coin. If we treat this as the security challenge it is, the solutions, energy independence, resilient food systems, and nature restoration actually make us a stronger and more stable society as a whole. In the military, they learn to plan for the future and others would rather not imagine. It takes a certain kind of courage to look a systemic threat in the eye and act before the 9 years start to run out. I'd be interested to hear how you see this. Does framing the climate as a national security issue change how you view the urgency of the transition? Or does it feel like another layer of noise? Definitely something worth pondering. Thank you for joining me today. See you again soon.